G'day there and welcome to the Pumped On Property Show. Now, I've got to say it has been a little while since I recorded a podcast purely for the podcast. I'm sorry for just sort of dumping the YouTube videos on you guys over the last few months, but we're back at it again now. You're sitting here today, I'm just on the couch in my office, very chill, just come from Pilates today. With Ben from Pumped On Property. So I'm the founder and the director here, and in today's podcast we're really going to explore property investing, and we're really going to look at it from the angle of somebody just getting started. So this would be a great episode for you if you're in your first or second property, if this is your first or second investment. I'm really going to break it into 6 very simple steps so that you can go from exactly where you are now to where you want to be medium term. Now in today's episode, I'm going to talk about how to figure out exactly where you are right now. I'm also going to talk about how to figure out exactly where you want to be and how to create a bit of a goal or a vision for your future that pulls you through everything that you're going to need to do over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years to get to where you want to be. I'm going to talk about strategy, which is what I find 95% of investors have a problem figuring out. Which strategy, why target that strategy, and how that strategy is going to get you to where you want to be. I'm going to talk about borrowing capacity and how things are changing in the market right now. I'm going to talk about how to identify the right market, the right suburb, the right property, and which areas in Australia are doing well right now. And I'm going to also talk about how I personally built a world-class team of advisors and how you can create one for yourself as well. So sit back, whether you're in the gym, whether you're in the car or on the train right now, whether you're just having a walk or listening to this somewhere else or watching it on YouTube, thank you so much. Now, a bit of an update really briefly on my life. Again, I'd much prefer to be doing these podcasts with my brother or with Adzi or with my sister Crystal as a team, or with one of the epic clients that we get to work with each month. But unfortunately, you're stuck with me. So as always, there could be a little bit more rambling than normal without someone pulling me up. In terms of my life, I just flew back from Sydney. I was literally down there for a couple of days over the weekend. I went to the Sydney Running Festival. Now, something insane happened with a mate of mine, and it's completely changed my perspective of this week and how I'm showing up in the world. My friend actually was the one I've talked about before that finished school in year 10, went and became a mechanic with Toyota, absolutely hated it. Went overseas with me and some other mates for a couple of months and decided that he wanted to get out of his apprenticeship as soon as he finished it. Then went back to high school through TAFE, then to university for an undergrad, then to university for postgraduate law, and is now working for one of the biggest law firms in Sydney. And it's just this crazy story of like 15 years of real hardship for this guy. And he's one of those guys that just has the most beautiful heart, but because he does, I think he's been pushed around a little bit and he never sort of goes after what he wants. And because he never goes after what he truly wants, he sort of hasn't put himself in any situations outside of the study that have really tested him in the last 20 years. And so we booked in for this marathon, not for a marathon, for the 10K. And basically what happened with him is that every moment throughout that journey leading up to it over the 6 weeks, he was just saying, no, I can't do it, and finding all these reasons and excuses. And what I was just hearing was all of this fear pouring out of him about actually having to do something that he didn't feel comfortable with. Now, I can relate to that, of course, and so can you, but hopefully, like myself, you're slowly working through that fear and overcoming these things head on, or just one little thing at a time. Now, we got to the day before the race, he hadn't registered, and then he registered. Now, because he'd registered late, he hadn't done any training for this thing. For anyone that's run 10Ks before, it's nice to go for at least 1 or 2 runs before it, just because it is a long way. We get into the run, there's 40 other thousand people doing it with us, which is epic. We come across the Harbour Bridge, we go through a bunch of tunnels, and we get to about the 6K mark, and he just effectively breaks down. Like literally, I've never seen anybody break down like this outside of like literally The Biggest Loser or something like that on TV back in the day. Like he broke down, and I just looked at him and I said, man, what's going on? And he said, and I will get back to property, sorry, but this is just something that happened in my life, and I'll tell you why it's important to all of us in a moment. He just broke down, and far out, it was a big moment for me and a massive moment for him. And I said, what's going on, man? Like, and he said, he was crying, and he just said, I've been through so much hardship in the last 15 to 20 years. And lately, like, he's been really battling with depression, and he's been medicated for about 15 years as well. He hasn't drunk for about 10 years because that's had a huge, massively negative impact on his mental health. And he just broke down because his body was just gone. Like he had nothing left to give. It was purely an internal mind battle. And anyone that's done distance, anything, running or whatever, knows that once you get past a certain point, it's really your mind that's carrying your body and your mind that's trying to stop it. And he was crying, and he said to me, you know, I've just gone through so much. He's like, right now in this moment, I just feel so good. He's like, it's giving me goosebumps. Like he's just, I feel so good. And I knew why he did, but he didn't. It was because he'd overcome something in his mind. Like he'd, for the last 2 or 3 Ks before that, been really struggling and wanting to stop. And I'd been sort of just trying to be there for him and say, keep going, man, you can do it. And sometimes we all need that person in our lives, whether it's financially or whether it's from a health perspective or a relationship perspective or a work perspective. Like shit gets real, and as you all know, like I've gone through a lot in the last couple of years with anxiety, but never depression like he was going through. And he said, I'm just so proud of how I am and who I am, and I'm so happy to be doing this. And then we ran together for about another K, and he just said, I've got to stop. And you know, my mindset, unfortunately, from the way that I've been brought up is you don't stop. You just keep pushing through and smashing through walls and bulldozing until you get to where you want to be. You know, which is kind of helpful but also very destructive. And I'm like, come on, man. And he just collapsed. And then we came past this chick, and she was really, really overweight and really struggling. And she was walking too. And then he said to her, and again, I will come back to property in this podcast, I promise. But he said that to this girl, he's like, you know, come on, keep going, you can do it. And then he started to run, and then she started to run, and we ran together for about 600 meters. And then he stopped again, and she kept running past. And then we, you know, kept doing this. We kept running past her, and she was running past us. And then we get to about 1.5 kilometers before the end, and she comes up behind us, and she's in much, much worse shape than my mate was. And she's like, come on. And by this point, he's literally like got his arm over me, and I'm pretty much dragging him and holding him. And he's like got his eyes shut. He looked like he was blind with his sunnies on. Like he was literally about to collapse because he'd just never done anything like that before. I think the biggest run he'd done before that was like 4 Ks in his life. And she just says, come on, mate, you can do it. And she grabbed his hand. It was like one of the most beautiful things that I've ever seen. This chick who was struggling so much more than he was grabbed his hand and said, come on, I'll run with you. And they ran hand in hand for like the next K. And then they both crossed the finish line. And it was just insane. And as soon as he crossed the finish line, he hands on his knees. The paramedics come running over because he dead set was about to pass out, and got some, you know, of those like sugar things in him, and he came good again. And for the whole day, like we went out for breakfast and a long lunch together, he was just vibing. And you know what it made me realize is that, you know, maybe you need some support. You know, I know at different times I need support, and sometimes we forget like that, you know, the best way to help yourself is to actually look after yourself, to do things that challenge you, to get outside your comfort zone, and to help and focus on other people. So, you know, if you're just starting out in property investing, this podcast or video is going to really help connect some of the dots around how you can put these pieces together. But regardless of where you're at with investing, what you've got to remember is that, like that run for my friend, I call him Lala, but his name's Elliot, is that, you know, this is going to challenge you at different times. You're going to feel completely fatigued. You're going to feel like you want to give up. all of these emotions from your past are going to come up and try and stop you. But if you can work through it, you know, it could be the day like it was for him that will change his future, because he knows that he's stronger than he thought he was. And if you've got people like me, like I've ran a marathon before, and I've ran and done a lot of competitive stuff for a long time, and he had me literally every single step of the way with him. And you know, that's what we try and do for our clients as a buyer's agent and as a coach and as a mentor and a friend in their life. And you know, that's why we only work with a very small number of people each month, so that we can really sit down and do the work with them to get them from where they are to where they want to be in 15 years. So the first thing you've got to do if you're just starting out is stop talking shit. Just being straight with you today. Stop talking rubbish and sit down and look at where you are right now. Now, there's a few things you need to do there, but the first one is really looking at yourself financially. And so to do that, you look at the fixed costs in your life, which are things like your phone, your rent, your home loan, your cars, your credit cards, you know, your food bills, your petrol bills, your electricity bills, water rates, insurances, whatever else you got going on in your life. And identify all of the fixed things. Maybe it's school fees, child support, maybe it's daycare fees, you know, maybe it's Netflix, Stan, etc. Just make a huge list of all of these items. And what I want you to do in the next 6 months is to have a spreadsheet with all of the items named, with all of the current costs. And then I want you to put another column into the spreadsheet, and I want you to systematically work through every one of those costs that are fixed and try and reduce them by 30%. Now, you might be sitting there going, Ben, I don't know how to do that. It's as simple as this. I used to be with Telstra, Vodafone and Optus for my phone, and I'd pay 100 to 110 bucks a month. Now I'm with Audi Mobile, and for my work phone, I pay 15 bucks a month for unlimited everything except data, and I pay 35 bucks a month for unlimited everything plus the data I need for my my home phone, my mate's phone, or my phone for the family. So, you know, that is just one example, right? Like, let's say that that one example there, I just saved 85% of mine, my work phone and my wife's phone's costs. Now, I've done this across every one of those line items in my life, and I've reduced them as much as possible. I'm doing that with my home loans at the moment. When I finish that, that will save me over $20,000 a year, or $1,500 to $2,000 a month in interest just from doing that. You know, there's so many options in the market to reduce your electricity bills, to reduce your food bills. Like my wife and I now shop at Aldi plus the local farmers market and save about 50% of our weekly food bill that way. There's just so many things that you can do. So the first thing about identifying where you are right now financially is look at all of the fixed costs. And then you've got another tab in your spreadsheet, which is your variable costs. Now, these are the things that make life fun. You know, for me, it's like eating out, it's training, it's paying for my one-on-one boxing coach, it's going to Pilates each week, it's, you know, stuff like flying down to Sydney and catching up with the boys, or the caravan I just bought with my wife. You know, have a look at those variable costs, and, you know, the reality is live your life your way, have an absolute ball. I'm not a person that's like, you can only invest and then in 20 years live your life. That sounds fucking horrible. But what I can say is that if you know, get yourself in a position where just for the period that you're saving for your first or second or third property, you know, cut down some of those variable costs in your life. Always have the fixed costs as low as possible. It'll make you sleep a lot better at night. You know, that can be a way to do it. Now, once you understand exactly where you are, the reason we do that is to find out how much income you have each week, minus your fixed costs, minus your variable costs that you need to maintain your mental health and feel freaking awesome about your life. And then from there, you effectively go, let's say I'm making $2,000 a week with my partner, or maybe I'm making $1,000 a week. My fixed costs are $1,000 a week. Then I can't save anything, but maybe you can move your fixed costs down by $300 a week, and all of a sudden you're in a position where you're saving $300 a week times 50 weeks a year is 15 grand a year. Now, what I want you to get in the habit of, if you're just figuring out where you are, is not just saving yourself money, and understanding where the money's going, but also paying yourself first. So for me, since I turned 24 and started earning real money after I finished uni, I've been paying myself first, and as my income goes up, I pay myself more every week. So for you, that really means sitting there, deciding on a dollar figure once you know where your income's at plus your expenses, and then just committing to that every week, and pay that before you pay anything else out into an account that you can't touch, so that you really get on the way. I know a lot of you, this might not be relevant because you've either got great equity in your own home, you earn big income, or you've already got big savings in the bank. So if this isn't relevant, I apologize, but for some other people it will be. Now, the second thing that we do, or the second step to, becoming a good property investor and getting into the market with the right product and the right strategy, is to know where you want to be. Now, I've probably had between 2,000 and 3,000 strategy sessions in the last 4.5 years with people from all over Australia and all over the world. And the number one thing that quality investors that are already financially free and people that are just getting started, the number one difference between the two is a very clear picture of where they are and where they want to be. Now, there's two things about where you want to be. One of them is something that's strong enough, like a vision for your ideal day, week, or year, that is strong enough to pull you through all the extra stuff you're going to have to do to become financially free on top of what you're doing now. Because you can do it the hard way like I did, which is kind of like my mate on the weekend, which is not training and just pushing yourself to the absolute limit. Or you can do it the easy way, which is the way that I'm doing it now, which is just a tiny little bit of maintenance every day, every week, over a year, and all of a sudden you're in great financial shape and you can do whatever you want to do when you want to do it. Now, for me, that run, even though I hadn't trained much for it, I'd literally did two runs before it, was a piece of cake, because one, I knew I could mentally go there after the marathon in the past. Two, I'm just consistently in a condition that allows me to do that sort of stuff without stressing on it. And that's the same way I treat my financial life. It's kind of like mowing grass. It's much easier to maintain than it is to slash and burn every couple of years. So with where you want to be, it's really about creating a day, a week, or a year, or a vision for your future that is so strong around the choices and the way that you want to live that would make you happy and content and in the present moment. And for me, that really looks like this. So when I shut my eyes, I see myself playing with my kids. They're little still in my mind, but I know in the future they'll be bigger. Spending time at the beach, having a great morning routine, drinking water, doing yoga, breathing well, having a beautiful breakfast, spending some time with my family, doing work that's meaningful for me, whether that's for myself or helping somebody else in their business, or if I work for someone else in the future, if this doesn't all work out. I see myself having passive income coming in from multiple streams, including businesses and properties that work completely without me, and that is complete passive income, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And I know this is so airy-fairy, but you can hear it in my voice, even though I'm monotone as, you can hear that I have this clear vision for my future and it pulls me through. I see myself as healthy and well, doing boxing, playing soccer, surfing, doing yoga, Pilates, random things like what I did on the weekend. I see myself doing work that I really, really enjoy, continuing to volunteer my time and to provide, charity like we do through our business and through myself and my wife. And to continue to have a life filled with people that I love and incredible clients coming in, with travel and adventures in the caravan and overseas, and just really like living my highest and best self. Like I see a Netflix documentary as well as books in the future as well. I see myself helping as many people as I can. Now, for you, you have to get that clear. Now, that's all the fluffy stuff. That's all the pulling you towards something that's not financial. But there's this other side of my personality, which is like, if you don't have a goal with an exact number and a time frame, then you're not going to achieve nothing. This is the old hood version of me. So, not the old version, I still love that gangster shit. But, this is the more 5 years from now, I want over $100,000 a year of passive income from my investments coming in. 15 years from now, I want somewhere between 250k and 500k of passive income coming in for life just through the properties, not including businesses. Now, that might sound extreme, but I've been working on this for 10 years, so that's very much within my reach and control. If I continue to maintain like I am, that's the trajectory that I'm going to reach regardless. For you, it might be as simple as going, hey, 15 years from now, I want to replace my current salary. So maybe you're earning 50 grand a year, or maybe like some of our clients, you're earning $50 million a year. You know, whatever that is for you. $50 million a year probably isn't going to happen through property alone. But, you know, if it's a realistic goal of somewhere between 50 grand and $1 million, depending on what it is that you're doing, then set that goal. You don't have to know exactly how you're going to achieve it yet, but you do need to understand that this is what you're working towards. You put it out into the universe, you set a date for it, and then you link that goal to all of that beautiful vision stuff that I talked about a moment ago. So, you know, it's a combination, all of this stuff, of the fluffy, as well as recognizing that people that actually do stuff and achieve something are very, very systematic about it. They set goals, they slowly work towards those goals, they achieve those goals, they change the plan if required, and they constantly maintain until they get to where they want to be. They don't just rock up one day in 15 years' time and they're there, because I can guarantee if you don't have a plan, a goal, and a vision, your life is going to look exactly the same as it does right now in 15 years' time, but you'll be older and you'll be probably a bit more bitter because you haven't done anything that you said you were going to do or that you saw yourself being able to do. And financial freedom is a piece of cake. Like, it is not hard. Investing is super simple if you play by the rules. So let's talk now. The third thing that I wanted to bring up is, you know, which strategy? There's lots of questions that people ask me, which I'm not going to go into today. But, you know, there's a whole lot of different ideas out there. You could buy and hold property. You could renovate it. You could develop it if you wanted to. You could buy metro or regional. You could go for cash flow or growth. You could hold it long term or short term. You know, you could go for cheap stuff or really expensive stuff. You could go for one, or you could go for many. You could go for houses and units. You know, if you're going to those courses and following the Spruik online, there's probably about another 100 get-rich-quick schemes that you can add on top of the stuff that just actually works as well that people are selling out there. You know, you could go brand new versus existing, close to the city, further away, on the beach, away from the beach. You know, there's just so many different ideas. So for me, you know, if you were sitting here and we were having our first meaningful client meeting after you'd paid us and engaged us, and you were one of those very small number of people we've decided to take on for that month, then I would be sitting there and going exactly this. Basically, I'd be saying, after we'd talked a lot about where you're at and what it is that you wanted, I'd be sort of saying that, you know, there's some things that smart investors do that no one else is talking about. Now, smart investors only buy metro markets because they know that Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane is not just where the population, job and income growth is going, but it's also where the long-term gains have been. Now, metro markets, according to CoreLogic, have performed 86% better in 25 years than regional markets. If that's not a big enough slap in the face to go for good quality stuff in good areas, then again, you know, go play the other game, but the chances of beating the house are zero in this particular instance, because the metro markets are going to smash the average regional performance. There'll be regional areas like Byron Bay that, you know, for example, or like Noosa that do better than some of the capital cities over a short period of time, but long term, there's absolutely no chance that they compete. So the other one is, you know, I'd be sitting here saying to you is buy houses over units, because the value in property is in the land. Now, again, CoreLogic have done the research for us. In the last 20 years, houses have beat units by 96%. You know, imagine you bought a regional unit. How sick in the guts would you be feeling right now, knowing that you've cost yourself and your family about 180% in growth in the last 25 years just because of one decision that you didn't know about back then? Don't make that mistake. If you own those types of properties now, completely cool. you know, you've got two options. One, hold them knowing this information, or two, rip the band-aid off, get out of them. Know that in a short period of time, in 10 years, any market and any type of product could beat any other one. But if you replace them with something better, the long-term averages are going to work out. Now, I also would be saying that timing is absolutely vital. So learn what Hare and Todd White are saying, what CoreLogic are saying, what Phil Anderson and Fred Harrison are saying about the big picture plus the local picture. You know, timing is your friend. If you understand it, you'll become wealthy beyond what you can ever imagine. If you don't, you'll absolutely pay the price and burn at some point throughout this wave that we go through over time. And that's probably all I'll say about that. I'll talk about that for hours. That's my favourite thing. I'd also be saying that you should be going for cash flow and growth, because the old way that our parents and anyone over 40 grew up thinking about property is that it just doubles every 7 to 10 years, which it doesn't anymore, because wages aren't growing anymore, and wages are not going to grow for a long, long, long time. So you've got to remember that, you know, unfortunately, capital growth is a thing of the past. It's going to keep occurring, but not in the same way. Maybe moving forward, properties will double every 15 to 20 years in Australia. I hope I'm so wrong about that. But we'll see what happens. Let's look back at this in 15 or 20 years. And that's why I go for above average cash flow. And so instead of getting your crappy 2, 2.5%, 3%, 4% return, why not go for 5, 6, 7, 8% returns by tweaking your strategy to go for cash flow? Now, the way that you do that is numbered. You could go Airbnb, boarding houses, or you could just do something simple like I do, which is a brand new house with a brand new granny flat called dual income, or an existing home with a brand new granny flat called house and granny flat effectively. So granny flats sound horrible, but they're not. They're not actually built for grannies. They actually look like really cool little 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom homes that you would 100% live in at different stages of your life, and that market absolutely loves. In 3 years in Brisbane, I've never seen one take more than 1 day to rent out. That's crazy. The yields on them are increasing at the moment as well. So, you know, the strategy: metro, houses, big piece of land, quality suburbs, close to the city or close to the beach if you can afford to, which why not? You know, it's extremely affordable in some markets right now. Timing, capital growth and cash flow. And if you can remember those things as part of your strategy, you're going to be in an exponentially better position than I am after 10 years of investing, because I stuffed a lot of those things up because I didn't even know about most of them till 4 to 6 years ago. Some of them I've only learnt in the last year, honestly. You know, this is the journey of an investor. You don't have to go out there and buy 12 properties like I did and have to sell 8 of them because they don't make any sense. You know, you can buy really good stuff if you're just getting started. Now, the fourth thing that you do, which I'll briefly touch on, is figure out how much you can borrow before you start looking. You know what I mean? Like, why get excited about going and buying, you know, Vaucluse in Sydney if you can only afford Dubbo, you know what I mean? If you've got a champagne taste like I used to have with a beer budget like I had, then, you know, don't misset your expectations and start looking at stuff that doesn't make sense. You know, just go talk to a mortgage broker. You know, hopefully you've learned that you just don't go talk to your bank directly anymore, because as we've seen in the commission, most of them are crooked and they can only sell you their product, which generally isn't the best for you in the market. Go talk to the broker and figure out how much you can borrow. You know, the best way to work with a broker if it's your first time is find someone that you trust. That's really hard because I've had a lot of different brokers and most of them, unfortunately, like most people in the workforce, are pretty average. You know, there's just unfortunately, this is the way that the curve looks. There's some really bad people. Most people are average, and then there's a small number of excellent people. You know, if you can find an excellent person straight off the bat or get referred to one, then that is going to completely change your investing. More than happy to introduce you to a great broker if you're a client of ours. That is absolutely one of the things that we reserve for clients. Just, my broker owns 25 properties outright and he's in his 40s and he did it from starting from nothing. Like, to work with someone like that that's done it for 25 years, they just get it. You know what I mean? If you can work with someone like that, that is a huge asset. And everyone in my team, which I'll speak about in a moment more, is just like that. So figure out how much you can borrow and then be happy with that. You know, I, of course, would have loved to have gone out and bought houses on Cronulla Beach when I was just starting, or houses on Bondi Beach or Manly. But I just didn't have $2 million in 2011 to go do that. Unfortunately, I don't have $3 million to do it in 2019 either. And I wouldn't do it because I don't want, you know, $800 a week rent on a $3 million purchase personally. But, you know, so what I did do when I was just starting is I went and bought a unit in Miranda. Now, I didn't know about this unit versus houses things then, otherwise I would have done something different. But I went and bought a unit, which is what I could afford, for $360,000, and then I could only borrow $300,000 for my next property. So I found a 5-bedroom house with a granny flat on the Central Coast for $213,000 in 2011 that was renting for $600 a week. Now, there's some of like the things that you learn, but what I'm trying to say there is that you start with where you're at, and slowly over time you accumulate better quality assets. If you play by the rules and you understand the things I talked about, which was part 3, strategy, and you buy metro, you buy close to the city, you buy houses that you can afford in, even if it's in a more affordable suburb, you know, you can beat the averages, and you can do that. And you can still buy in Brisbane so cheap right now. It's cheaper to buy now than it was in 2008, so get your head around that. The 5th thing that I wanted to touch on, which I've talked about in other videos and other podcasts a bit more, and I won't have enough time to go into massive detail, but, you know, how to identify, I think, 2 questions that I get from investors. One is now the right time to buy? You know, you can answer that question yourself through looking at CoreLogic's video updates. They're literally 10 minutes a month, or reading the Heron Todd White month in review report, or the SQM forecast report, or the BIS shrapnel reports. There's so many good free sources of information to get good stuff about if it's the right time to buy. I personally do think it's a good time to be buying, particularly Southeast Queensland. But, you know, in terms of which market, you can go find that out through those sources I just mentioned. Then once you find the market, you know, think about Sydney or Melbourne, for example. Like, Sydney's this massive city, so you've identified which state, New South Wales, you've identified which Sydney. Then you've gone, there's north, east, centre of Sydney, then there's western Sydney, and then there's southern Sydney. Now, southern Sydney on the beach, eastern beaches, northern beaches, plus the CBD are the most premium areas. And so as an investor, if you can afford to go for quality, go for quality. You know, if you can't go for quality, then maybe it's not worthwhile buying 30, 40, 50 Ks away in Western Sydney or West or North Melbourne just because it's Melbourne. It's not really Melbourne. It's not really Sydney. It's, you know, affordable areas with overpriced properties where people earn average money, and a lot of people have multiple generational social issues, you know what I mean? And that's a huge problem because that's not good quality long-term investing. And I think a house in Parramatta, or a house in Blacktown, or a house in Penrith, or a house in North or Deep West Melbourne, or a house in Deep South Brisbane or Deep West Brisbane will look like a nightmare in the next GFC when, you know, say 15% of those people in those areas lose their jobs, another 15% are already on Centrelink, and then another 50% of the people that bought there are investors, and they all can't afford to pay for those properties in those areas at the same time. That's why cheaper areas like that just have such massive fluctuations in values, because it's a deadly area. Like, something happened in America recently where the American version of Centrelink stopped paying for 2 weeks. Something like 25% of Americans had to go get short-term loans just to put food on their table within the first 2 weeks. 15% of those people had to go within a week and get a short-term loan. Now, this is why we have crises, because so many people are living week to week, month to month, year to year still. They're not investing in their futures. They're not investing in this education that you are, and that puts them in very, very vulnerable positions. I don't want to be buying in areas where people are put in vulnerable positions, because I know what happens to vulnerable people in vulnerable positions when there's no bailout and there's no easy money, or the Centrelink money stops, or their job stops, is that these people freak out, they bail out, they stop paying rent, they sell their properties for a discount just to get it off their books, or the banks come and repossess them, and that is a huge problem for cheap, shitty areas. So the reason I say this is so important to know now for you is because what I'm trying to get to is buy the quality area. The quality area of Brisbane's east, north, and the city centre. The quality area of Sydney's south, east, city centre plus north. The quality area of Melbourne's the city centre and east. Buy quality. Save up for a little bit longer to buy quality. It's not good enough to just own an investment. With the right strategy, with the right market, with the right pocket of the market, you can do so much better than average, and you can limit your risk and your downside by understanding that in some markets, about once every 14 to 20 years, people become very, 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 very vulnerable, and you don't want to be caught up with those people at that time. In terms of which property, I've just got some rules. In fact, I've got about 150 of them that we share with clients and that we educate you with if that's something that you want to learn as you work with us. And what we do is we go and look at every sale in the suburb. We then map those sales in the suburb by cheapest, middle, and premium. So we don't just buy the best city at the best time in the best suburbs and the best positions, but we buy the best pockets of each suburb. We buy the best streets. You want a quiet street. You don't want to be next to Housing Commission. You don't want any bushfire or flooding issues or mining issues. You don't want to be directly next door or in a street with more than 5% Housing Commission. You want to be in a quiet street, a quality pocket. For me, I want blocks at least 500 square metres. The bigger the better. I know there's a lot of hype at the moment around smaller lot sizes, and a lot of the brand new areas you can see the lots are coming down, and there's commentators talking about how the Australian dream's over and that smaller lots are where it's at. I think that's absolute horseshit. I just think that is just such bullshit. It's just been sold that way by developers or by people that, I think the value in real estate globally for the last 300 years, or even the last 2,000 years, plus the next 2,000 years coming, is going to be, as it's always been, the bigger the land size, the better, in the best location possible. So again, don't just buy the best pocket, buy the best suburb that you can afford in that pocket. Buy the best street, buy the best home. Now, I want the land size to be good. I want the home to be in good condition. In terms of which property, you could go for unrenovated, or you could go for renovated, or you could go for brand new. There's options there depending on your budget plus what your goals are. In terms of property, like I said, everything that I'm holding long term, long term being 15 plus years, is giving me great income. I want at least a 6% yield, if not up to 8% yield if I can get it plus. Now, the sixth and last thing I wanted to touch on this massive podcast is really just about building a world-class team of advisors. Now, what I'm sort of referring to there is you are only good as the people around you, and good people congregate together. So the people that you need in your team are a good broker, a good solicitor, a good building and pest inspector, a great property manager, and then as you become more sophisticated, a good builder, a good granny flat builder, a good renovation company if you need something like that, a great town planner as well, and a great tax depreciation specialist, as well as a great accountant. So there's really 10 people in your core team. And then, the most important advisor to you, depending on how you are. Now, I know a lot of you listening to this, are kind of like, why would I pay someone to do something that I can do myself? That's probably why 60% of investors lose money on what they buy in their first 5 years. I spoke to a lady yesterday, absolutely beautiful lady. She bought a property in 2008 in Brisbane, which was, for anyone that knows their history, in the 3 years leading up to 2008, property prices in Brisbane went up by 85%. They've done 1.9% per year since then for the last 11 years straight. She bought at the very, very top of a 20-year cycle in a GFC, the second worst that we've had in the last 100 years. She paid 305 grand for that townhouse in a shitty area of Brisbane, which is now worth under $150,000. Now, I've never really heard of someone losing 50% in Sydney, Melbourne or Brisbane in a 11-year period of time, but you know, she was sold by the wrong advisor, you know, which was a property marketer, probably referred to her by her accountant or financial planner who was getting a clip from them, or her mortgage broker. But you know, the number one person in your life, if you can find a good one, is going to be that, hopefully someone like me, like a buyer's agent that becomes a friend, a mentor and a coach, that you can leverage off their ideas, their market understanding. You know, in Brisbane, for example, I think we've bought somewhere between $200 to $250 million worth of property now. You know, in a very, very particular, like less than 20 suburbs for over 450 clients now. It's really, really difficult to recreate that. Now, again, I know a lot of you can do it yourself. You know, it's whether you want to, you need to, or you can trust someone else to be that partner to slowly educate you to not just become a better investor, but to make a much, much better initial decision. So if that is you, love to offer you a one-on-one strategy session with me or my brother Simon. Please jump over to www.pumpedonproperty.com. You know, let's talk about where you are and where you'd like to be. Let's honestly talk about what's holding you back, and let's create a property investment plan or a goal for the next 12 months so that you can get really clear on your next step, and whether you go and do that on your own, which is completely cool. We do about 60 of those sessions a month, but only take on a small number of clients, somewhere generally between 7 and 10 a month. You know, so it's certainly not a sales call. We're not trying to pick you up. You know, we just want to add as much value, and you can take all of that and go and do it yourself and smash it, or you might be able to become one of those people that we help each month after I talk to the team and see if we're the right fit long term for each other. So, you know, I hope you've enjoyed this podcast or this video, depending on how you're following it. Property investing is easy if you understand these things and apply them, and very, very, very difficult if you don't. So sometimes it's better to just take a breath, take a moment to recenter yourself, to go, okay, I don't know everything, maybe I need to learn a bit more, or hey, I'm feeling really confident now, you know, it's time for me to get started. And you know, what makes a great investor isn't knowing everything about everything. It's about reducing all of Australia down to, you know, one state, one city, one pocket of the city, one suburb, one pocket of the suburb, one strategy and one type of property that you're targeting. And so that you can become so specialist in your knowledge around that area that you have a massive buying advantage over anybody else who's looking at that area. And then you get the right property at the right time with the right criteria in the right condition for you based on your risk profile and your long-term gains to set yourself or you and your family up for life. So if you haven't already done so, please give us a thumbs up. Please subscribe if you're on YouTube, or if you're on the podcast on Spotify or Apple. Please give us a 5-star review so that this podcast can start to be shown to more people. Share this with a friend who's looking to get started. That would get a huge amount of value out of this. And I just wish you honestly all the best. You know, property investing is my passion. It's so much fun. And hopefully over time, you know, it becomes a way that with whatever else you're doing, your job, your business, your super, your shares, your crypto, just another lever that you can pull to put yourself and your family or your partner into a much better financial position in the future, and to start to create choices in your life to live the life that you want to live for you based on how it is that you want to spend each day. So I wish you all the best. Have a great day. Good luck investing, and, you know, keep learning. Thank you.